Imagine an island where 80% of the population is obese, where half the land is uninhabitable, and where only 200 tourists visit each year. But that's not all. This island was once the richest country per capita in the world, and today it's been described as an open-air prison. What happened to Nauru, and how did this tropical paradise turn into one of the world's most tragic cautionary tales? Stick around because the truth about Nauru is shocking. Welcome to our channel, your gateway to the world's most fascinating and forgotten places. In today's video, we're diving into the story of Nauru, a remote Pacific island with a history so extreme it feels like fiction. From unimaginable wealth to devastating poverty, from being a luxury haven to a nightmare of environmental collapse, this island's journey is unlike any other. If you're curious about the hidden corners of our planet, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an adventure. Now let's uncover the rise and fall of Nauru. Nauru is so small, it's easy to miss on a map. At just 21 square kilometers, it's the world's smallest country, larger only than Vatican City and Monaco. But unlike the luxury of Monaco or the spiritual significance of the Vatican, Nauru is a place of forgotten struggles. Located in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, its closest neighbor is Banaba Island, over 300 kilometers away. The nearest major city, Brisbane, Australia, is almost 3,000 kilometers away. This extreme remoteness has shaped Nauru in profound ways. For centuries, the island remained relatively isolated from the rest of the world. Its people, the Nauruans, thrived on fishing, coconut farming, and living in harmony with the island's natural resources. Despite its idyllic tropical setting, reaching Nauru is no easy feat. With one international airport, which shares its runway with the surrounding streets, and limited flights operated only by a few airlines, the island is more isolated than you can imagine. For those who do make it to Nauru, they are greeted by a coastline encircled by coral reefs, a single ring road of just 19 kilometers, and modest villages. The island's beauty, though scarred by decades of phosphate mining, still holds an unpolished charm that reminds visitors of what once was. But this isolation is just the beginning of Nauru's story. Life on such a small island is a constant balancing act between limited resources, external dependency, and survival. Over the decades, Nauru's story evolved from one of quiet simplicity to unimaginable prosperity, and finally to an ongoing struggle for identity and survival. Have you ever heard of a country this small and remote? Wait until you hear how this isolation shaped its destiny. Nauru's troubles started long before it became a global symbol of environmental devastation and political controversy. In the early 20th century, geologists discovered that Nauru sat on some of the world's richest phosphate deposits. Phosphate, formed from centuries of accumulated bird droppings, turned out to be as valuable as gold in the agricultural world. The phosphate became the backbone of Nauru's economy, driving its transformation into a booming economic miracle. By the 1970s, the island's per capita income was the highest in the world, surpassing even oil-rich nations. Residents lived in luxury unimaginable for a small Pacific nation. The government provided free healthcare, education, and even housing allowances. There were no taxes, and foreign luxury goods like expensive cars, electronics, and food imports were readily available. Yet this wealth came at a catastrophic cost. The phosphate mining stripped Nauru of its fertile land, leaving behind a barren, cratered landscape that resembles the moon. The island's lush tropical forests were replaced with jagged limestone pinnacles, and the once rich topsoil was gone forever. Today, more than 80% of the island is uninhabitable, forcing most of the population to live in a narrow coastal strip. The environmental damage was so extensive that it changed the island's climate, making it more prone to heat and droughts. As the phosphate reserves dwindled in the 1990s, so did Nauru's wealth. Without a backup plan, the country spiraled into bankruptcy. Desperate for income, the government turned to controversial practices. They established offshore tax havens, which attracted money launderers and criminals. When that failed, they made deals with Australia to host offshore detention centers for asylum seekers. These facilities, often described as inhumane and akin to prisons, further tarnished Nauru's image. This chapter of Nauru's history reflects how reliance on a single resource and poor planning can turn a paradise into a cautionary tale. Did you know that one of the richest nations in the world could fall this fast? But the story gets even darker. Nauru has earned the unfortunate title of the world's most obese nation. A staggering 80% of its population is classified as overweight, and 40% suffer from diabetes. This small island nation is grappling with a public health disaster that seems almost impossible to reverse. The origins of this crisis lie in Nauru's phosphate boom. During its peak, the wealth allowed residents to import processed, calorie-dense foods from abroad. Fresh produce became a rarity, and traditional diets of fish, coconut, and root vegetables were replaced by canned meats, sugary drinks, and instant noodles. Once, obesity was a sign of prosperity in Nauru. Larger physiques were associated with wealth and status. This cultural perception, combined with a lack of awareness about healthy eating, contributed to the growing problem. Today, the health consequences are devastating. Many Nauruans suffer from heart disease, hypertension, and complications from diabetes, such as kidney failure and amputations. The healthcare system, once a point of pride, struggles to cope with the high demand for chronic disease management. Adding to the challenge is the lack of arable land. With 80% of the island rendered uninhabitable by mining, there is virtually no local agriculture. Fresh fruits and vegetables must be imported, making them expensive and inaccessible to most families. As a result, many rely on cheap, unhealthy food options, perpetuating the cycle of poor health. Efforts to combat obesity in Nauru have been slow and inconsistent. Public health campaigns encourage exercise and better eating habits, but these initiatives face cultural resistance and logistical challenges. For an island so dependent on imports, changing dietary habits is a monumental task. The obesity epidemic in Nauru is a stark reminder of how sudden wealth and poor planning can have lasting consequences, not just on a country's economy, but also on its people's health. If you think this is shocking, wait until you learn about Nauru's struggles with tourism. Incredibly, Nauru has no army. Instead, the country depends entirely on Australia for its defense, under an informal agreement. This arrangement underscores Nauru's reliance on larger nations for its survival. Without its own military, Nauru has little ability to respond to external threats or regional instability. Even its small, underfunded police force struggles to maintain internal order, facing challenges like rising crime, domestic disputes, and the security of detention centers for asylum seekers. In a world where geopolitical tensions can shift rapidly, Nauru's lack of military capabilities makes it one of the most vulnerable nations. While this reliance on Australia brings some reassurance, it also leaves the country with limited sovereignty in matters of defense. Despite this vulnerability, the island has remained largely peaceful. Its isolation and lack of strategic importance have, so far, spared it from external conflicts. However, this peace is fragile, relying not on Nauru's own strength, but on the goodwill of its more powerful allies. Can you imagine living in a nation entirely reliant on others for protection? For Nauruans, this is their reality. Despite its unique history and intriguing story, Nauru is one of the least visited countries on Earth. Fewer than 200 tourists venture to this tiny Pacific island each year. a number that pales in comparison to even the least popular tourist destinations elsewhere. Why is that? The challenges begin with accessibility. With only one airline, Nauru Airlines, operating flights and a single runway that doubles as a community space, getting there is a logistical challenge. Tickets are expensive, flights are infrequent, and the journey often involves long layovers in far-flung locations. Then there's the high cost of living for visitors. Nauru lacks the infrastructure to support tourism. Forget luxury resorts or vibrant nightlife. There aren't even mid-range hotels or organized tour operators. Most accommodations are basic, and options for dining out are limited to small, family-run establishments. But for those intrepid travelers who make the journey, Nauru offers something money can't buy: authenticity. You can explore the island's rugged coastline, snorkel in pristine lagoons, or visit relics of its phosphate mining history. However, the true treasure lies in its people, resilient, friendly, and eager to share their stories. What would it take for you to visit a place like Nauru? Let us know in the comments below. At the heart of Nauru's tragedy lies its environmental collapse, a stark reminder of the cost of unchecked exploitation of natural resources. Decades of relentless phosphate mining have left the island's interior a barren wasteland. Once covered in lush tropical forests and fertile land, more than 80% of Nauru's land is now unusable. The jagged limestone pinnacles left behind by mining stretch across the landscape, making it look more like a post-apocalyptic scene than a tropical paradise. Efforts to rehabilitate the land have been slow and costly. Replanting efforts and soil restoration projects have been attempted, but with limited success. Without fertile soil, agriculture is nearly impossible, and Nauru remains heavily dependent on imported food, adding to its economic struggles. The environmental damage has also affected the island's climate. With fewer trees and vegetation to absorb rainfall, water scarcity has become a persistent issue. Rising sea levels driven by climate change now threaten Nauru's already narrow habitable coastal areas, adding another layer of urgency to its environmental crisis. For the Nauruans, this devastation isn't just a loss of land, it's a loss of identity, culture, and hope for future generations. Could Nauru ever restore what it has lost? Or is this small island destined to remain a warning to the world? Nauru's political system has been plagued by corruption, instability, and frequent changes in leadership, further complicating its recovery efforts. The government has faced accusations of mismanagement, particularly regarding the wealth from its phosphate boom. Much of the revenue from those prosperous years was squandered on ill-advised investments and lavish spending. Instead of building a sustainable future, the funds were depleted, leaving the island in financial ruin. In recent years, Nauru's economy has relied heavily on aid from Australia and revenue from offshore detention centers for asylum seekers. While these detention centers bring in much-needed income, they have also drawn widespread international criticism. Described by human rights organizations as inhumane, the conditions in these centers have been compared to prisons. Reports of mental health crises, abuse, and poor living standards among detainees have tarnished Nauru's reputation. The arrangement has also strained the island's limited resources, creating tensions between locals and detainees. Adding to the political challenges are ongoing disputes over land ownership, nepotism, and a lack of transparency. Efforts to attract foreign investment or diversify the economy have been slow, with many potential investors deterred by the island's instability and lack of infrastructure. Despite these struggles, the resilience of Nauru's people shines through. Grassroots movements and international partnerships are working to create change, albeit slowly. Will Nauru find its way out of these challenges, or will it remain trapped by its past mistakes? Nauru's story is a stark reminder of how wealth and prosperity can quickly turn to poverty and despair. It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of environmental exploitation, political corruption, and unsustainable lifestyles. What do you think about Nauru? Would you ever visit this island, or do you think it's beyond saving? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more eye-opening journeys into the world's hidden corners. Stay curious, and we'll see you in the next video.